Oil prices are at a 7-year high and the Gulf region is on high alert. On Monday, Iranian-backed Houthi rebels from Yemen launched missiles and drones on the capital of the United Arab Emirates. The strikes killed 3 oil workers and started a fire at Abu Dhabi airport. The Houthis were quick to claim responsibility for the attacks, saying they were in retaliation for the UAE's involvement in the Saudi-led campaign in Yemen. The US, UN and regional countries have all condemned the missile strikes, with the UAE warning the acts will not go unpunished. Houthi rebels have launched hundreds of missiles on Saudi Arabia since it entered Yemen's civil war in 2015. But this week's attacks were the first to strike deep inside the UAE. Abu Dhabi has called on the US to re-designate the Houthis as a terrorist group. Last year, early into his presidency, Joe Biden removed them from a terrorist list, saying the designation hampered aid efforts in Yemen. And to discuss what the attack on the UAE could mean for the region, I'm joined from Ankara by Ahmet Keser. He is an associate professor of international relations at Hasan Kalyoncu University. And from Oxford, Sam Ramani. He is an associate fellow at RUSI, a British defense and security think tank. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk, and thank you very much for joining me. So, Sam, what's behind the Houthis' attack on the United Arab Emirates and what they were trying to achieve?
So the Houthis have been threatening the United Arab Emirates for some time. There was an attack on a maritime vessel in 2016, and since 2017, the Houthis have repeatedly warned that they have the missile capabilities not just to cross the border and attack Saudi Arabia, but also to go long range and attack the UAE, and that included sites like the Dubai Expo. So this is more from the Houthis, a way of showing strength against the Saudi-led coalition in the United States, and also it's a way of showing that the UAE's increased role in the Yemen war, which is evident from its participation with the Saudis against the Houthis in central Marib, is unwelcome, and that the Houthis will retaliate against Emirati presences there and in southern Yemeni areas like Shabwa.
So, Ahmed, how has this latest attack exposed the UAE's vulnerabilities, considering how far those drones and missile attacks were able to reach?
Indeed, this new attack shows that the escalation just reached a new milestone, because before we have witnessed that the UAV attacks were usually used to close areas to the border. But this time, when we look at the Yemen border and Abu Dhabi, it's more than 1,200 kilometers, and the range is really high. So this threatens the security of the all Gulf countries, especially which are heavily depending on the foreign direct investment. And they may lose their being safe havens against these kind of attacks. So this is a new, let's say, measure or grade at the UAV usage at the security area.
So, Sam, do you agree? Has this attack hurt the UAE's image as a safe and secure environment for businesses?
Well, it definitely has caused a bit of a shock against the UAE's economic viability in terms of its security, and that's precisely one of the goals of the Houthi attacks, because the Houthis have often said that attacking the engines of the Saudi and Emirati economies and economic targets, whether it be fuel tankers or whether it be airports, are legitimate, because that economic power fuels the military campaign. So from that regard, yes, this does create a temporary, at least, concern. But if the Emiratis are able to repel future attacks or future attacks don't follow, it might be like the Iranian attack in Fujairah in 2019, and everything will go back to normal.
So, Ahmet, many were surprised about the sophistication of the missiles and drones which the Houthis used. Iran has said publicly that it does not provide military support to the Houthis. But could Houthis have developed those missiles on their own, or has this attack exposed that Iran may be playing a bigger role than it says?
Of course, they deny that they haven't provided those kind of weapons for the Houthis, but it is for sure that another foreign country is supporting Houthis and they provide weapons for them. But of course, none of the countries will accept this directly. But when the evidence is in the hand, I think new sanctions will be on the agenda from the American side and the Gulf countries side as well. So that's why, of course, they will deny, but for sure there is another third country in the back of these providing weapons.
Sam, are Houthis testing the UAE's efforts or, let's say, resolve to ease tensions with Iran?
So I think that obviously the Houthis want the UAE to diminish its presence in southern Yemen. And since 2019, the Emiratis have transferred officially, at least from military first to a peace first strategy, which has been misinterpreted by some as a withdrawal. But actually, what the Emiratis have been doing is retreating towards areas of remote power projection and relying increasingly on surrogates and proxies in that area. And they were so confident of the success of that strategy that they actually closed down their base in Assab in Eritrea early last year. So now the Houthis are wanting to show that the Emiratis are still there and they're targeting their proxies and surrogates to get them mired back into the conflict or to withdraw entirely. With regards to UAE-Iranian relations, I think the effect will be negligible, at least in the short term. It's important to keep in mind that Rima al-Hashmi recently invited Ebrahim Raisi to visit UAE on February 7th. So things are moving as normal there, and the Emiratis will probably choose dialogue with Iran instead of confliction in this scenario.
Do you believe that President Raisi will still be visiting the country?
Well, I think that President Raisi's visit was scheduled already previously from, I believe, December the 14th, when there was talks between Tanood bin Zayed, the UAE National Security Advisor, and the Iranians. And this has been something that's been in the works for quite a long time. I think since the summer of 2019, when they signed at least a dialogue agreement about maritime security and other issues. So the UAE has been trying to take a bit of an independent track on the Iran issue from the Israelis, the Saudis, or even the United States for a while.
Yes. So Ahmet, the UAE warned that the acts will not go unpunished. So could the UAE still set up its campaign in Yemen and leave the door open for diplomacy with Iran at the same time?
Well, it's a dilemma. At least we have a lot of dilemmas in Yemen situation, because on the one side, the countries like Saudi Arabia are spending billions of dollars. For example, in 2020, $53 billion, and in 2021, $50,000 billion for armed groups of supporting. But on the other hand, United Nations cannot find funds for $3.8 billion for protecting the people, civilians. So there are a lot of dilemmas, but of course there is at least a table open for dialogue. That's why I think the United Arab Emirates side is pushing United States to reclassify Houthis as a terrorist organization. And this is also another dilemma, because if you want to talk with Houthi side and to bring the peace into the region, but if you classify them as a terrorist organization, how these diplomatic dialogues will go on the table. So there are a lot of dilemmas in the region. On the one side, Iran, on the one side, Gulf countries, on another side, United States, and also the humanitarian protection issues, which are very urgent in the region.
So, Sam, how do you think the Biden administration will answer the UAE's request to re-designate Houthis as a terror group?
Well, that's a bit of a tough issue, because the Biden administration made it very clear during the election campaign and also in its first foreign policy speech in February that the U.S. was determined to end all support for the Saudi-led military intervention in Yemen and help end the Yemen war. And one of the ways in which to end the Yemen war was to reverse the terrorism designation that the Trump administration imposed on the Houthis, in the hopes that the Houthis could engage in intra-Yemeni dialogue, or even the Americans and the Iranians could eventually engage in dialogue on the Yemen issue in tandem with nuclear talks. So the Biden administration has got a lot of institutional opposition towards making this move, but the combination of UAE pressure and Jake Sullivan's comment that this was a terrorist attack suggests that it's probably more likely than not that there will be a designation in the near future, even if that does lead to humanitarian aid cuts to Yemen and some other problems.
Yes, and if they reverse this decision, I wonder how would they justify the worsening humanitarian situation in the country, as Ahmet just mentioned. So, Ahmet, Israel has also offered the UAE security and intelligence support after the attack. What's your take on that?
You know that Israel and Gulf countries, most of the countries except for the Qatar, are working together in some security issues. So also we can add Turkey, because we know that the United Arab Emirates and Turkey now in opening a new gate for cooperation. So this UAV usage may give the pay for new cooperation areas between Israel and Gulf countries and Turkey and Gulf countries as well. Because the experience, I think, gained by Turkey in the conflict areas in the usage of UAVs and in the production of the UAV technologies is quite well ahead of the globe. And Turkey may provide UAVs and anti-air missiles or anti-air defense systems for defending the Gulf countries for themselves, for a sustainable security in the region.
Yes.
So this situation itself has dilemmas as well. On the one side, threatens against the security of the region, and on the other side, new opportunities for cooperation between other countries and the Gulf countries as well.
So, Sam, what's next for the region? Do you expect more intensified operations into Yemen?
Well, I think that there will be retaliations from the Saudi-led military coalition against this, and we've already seen that with the wave of Saudi airstrikes that hit Sana'a in the hours that followed the Houthi attack on the UAE. We'll probably see the Emiratis and the Saudis coordinating much more aggressively in Marib, and the Emiratis perhaps providing more technical support for the security belt and other proxies in southern Yemen, or maybe even re-inflaming things in Socotra. So I think that there will be a heightened war, and if the Houthis respond with more drone strikes on Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which is what Mohammed Abdul Salam's statement seems to suggest, then we could be in for an intensification of the conflict, sadly, rather than a de-escalation.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.